Hi everyone, it's Sister Folk, and this is part 2 of our optional video critique. The last person that I critiqued on Facebook was Tom. So if your name is after Tom, your critique will be on this video instead of the one before. So let's go ahead and get started with the critiques. Okay, we are going to start with Mari. Be sure to, if your critique is on this video, be sure to watch the first 2 or 3 minutes of the other video where I go over some general things that people tend to miss on a lot of the assignments. Okay, so this is your cover page. I really like how you have this big image here with a nice strong focal point. That looks really good. And here you have your columns. These are nice. This first letter, instead of just making it so big, I would encourage you to come in and to play around with the tip that I showed you on the weekly announcement video, where you highlight that letter and you come into your paragraph palette and increase the size of it here. And this is going to help it look a little bit more professional because the top is going to stay in line with your content. Okay, so that's one thing I noticed on your main page there. And then the other thing is, I think this light blue might be too light. It's kind of, especially right on this line, it's blending in too much. And so I think I would recommend you to try to find a different color so this title really pops. And then I like that you have your 2 contrasting typefaces, but I would encourage you to play around with the size a little bit more. Since this is a long title, I would probably have maybe, I think maybe I would switch it so you don't have challenges and world, or if you do, just make sure you have of today's world and meeting the smaller. So maybe you have meeting the challenges, and that kind of exists in this space. And then underneath it a little bit, you could have of the, and then world right here. And I think it would look, with this image, I really think it would look nice with a script font because you have this really cute picture of everybody, and your sans serif is more, or your serif is more classic, and this looks kind of more youthful and modern. And so I think it would be really cute to have something like one of these fonts that you could use instead for the word challenge and world, and then you could repeat that with your subtitles. So play around a little bit more with this title. There's no sense of alignment, or if there is, I can't really tell because it's so light over here. So remember to still use the rules of alignment, all right? And that might help you kind of keep it consistent. If you need to take away this box in order to make more room for your title, I would recommend doing that because the title is the most important thing. Okay, down here your columns are looking nice. I don't see any hyphens, so that's great. Let's go ahead and look at your next 2 pages. Okay, you have your columns here, that's nice, and you have a shape. I would increase the size here between where your words end and where the shape begins. They're a little bit too close. So go into where you did this text wrap, and you're going to play around with the number that's on the top left. I don't have anything selected. Let's see. Sorry for my sniffles. Okay, there's my flower. Come along and select text wrap and play around with this number, and that should increase the size between where your shape ends and where the type begins to give you a little bit more room to breathe right here. Also, you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed because you feel like you have to have the whole article on here, and so it's detracting from your ability to have bigger margins and more white space. I'm totally fine with you cutting off some of these paragraphs so you can increase the white space and maybe decrease the width of your columns. so they have a little bit more room to breathe around them. Okay, see how these columns have space around them to kind of give your eye a visual break? I think that would look really nice if you could add some of that white space around these columns so your eye has a visual break. Also make sure they're consistent. Over here you have spaces between your paragraphs. Over here you don't. Honestly, it looks better with the spaces, but you were probably worrying that you were going to run out of room. And so I would cut down the article, add in the spaces, and then remember you need to add in subtitles. So maybe you take that fun script font and you add nice subtitles to break up this, okay? And so that's kind of, oh, and I also only see one image. So remember, you do need to have 2 images on here. So be sure you add another image that you took, and that will also change the layout a little bit, obviously. So you're going to need to probably definitely decrease the size of the article based on that. But I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thanks, Mari. Okay. Nope, don't want that. Okay, Kathleen, it looks like you're next. And you opted in. Okay, great. Let's take a look at yours. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you have a lot of writing on your last 2 pages. It looks like you have your pull quote there inside a shape that's wrapped around, which is great. This one is your title, obviously. Excuse me, I need to blow my nose. Sorry, I'm not used to cold weather, and it was slightly cold this morning. My body's like, I don't know how to handle this anymore. I've acclimated to Texas. So, okay, I think you took this image, which is looking good. I like how it has some white space on the actual image. And the thing it makes me think of is it's a great place to have your writing, as opposed to having your writing on the image where you have this conflict. You should probably take advantage of this awesome white space and have your type here. You could do a nice long thin column to kind of fill, and then you could have your title up in this portion perhaps. And I would take this image into just your photo editor that comes on your default in your computer and play around with a few of the filters in it, because it looks a little bit washed out. And see how this should be more white, and instead, and maybe this probably should be white too, and it's looking more gray. And then these trees look kind of a grayish green as opposed to a green. So I would play around with that a little bit just on one of your defaults, or there are lots of online photo editors too that you could put it into and play around with it until we learn how to use Photoshop. I like how you have this poem italicized. That looks really nice. And you have the large E, which you're thinking along the right tracks. But what I would recommend is be sure to select the letter, and then in the paragraph palette, increase the size here as opposed to just making it bigger. And this will be the industry standard way of doing that, as opposed to just making the letter bigger so it sticks above the writing. Okay. And I will say I don't really like this font. I think this one is one of the default ones on Microsoft Word. And so it has a really dated look. It does follow the rule of contrast. So you're on the right track. It's just not the right font, I would say. And really there's not, I mean, that's a matter of opinion. I'm not saying it's a bad font. I'm just saying it's one of the defaults, and so it's overused. And so it instantly makes the design look kind of dated, as opposed to coming in and downloading something new, which I show you how to do on the announcement video. That's really going to help have your design look like it's not dated. It's not something that's been around for a while. Even something like one of these would look really nice. okay? And you want to look on the category sans serif, serif, and script probably are what you want to stick to, and probably just the first 3 of the scripts. So it maintains still kind of classy air, but not something that's been around for a long, long time. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back. Those are some of the changes I would make. Your columns look pretty good. I like how you have them down there. I would encourage you to try to make them start on the same line, so the columns are aligned on the top. Now, if you move them up into this awesome blue white space that you have, you're not going to really have that much of an issue with that. But if you decide to keep them down here for some reason, I would make sure they align at the top, and any column that you start, I would try to make sure it aligns at the top, and as much as possible at the bottom too. So let's take a look at your writing here, where, yeah, see how you did a good job of that? That looks really nice. And I don't know if maybe accidentally hit backslash here. Just make sure you take that out. This is that same font, so I would change that out as well. Your pulled quote is looking good. One of the things that's capturing my attention is this is a very monochromatic color scheme, which can look really nice, but there's not really any element of contrast working here. All the type is about the same. Your pulled quote is not, I mean, it grabs your attention, but it's a pretty safe pulled quote in terms of its size and in terms of the font inside of it. So remember one of the rules of contrast. Maybe you could make this background black. Well, I probably wouldn't recommend white here, white font, but maybe you could make the background white and this black font, which kind of is a default thing that we think of, but it might work well with you allowing to have some blue in other areas. I just think all 3 pages blue is a little bit too much. Okay, and then one thing that might be helpful is you can definitely cut this article. I think it's too much writing on your next 2 pages, and it's probably limiting you on your ability to have some flexibility. So I would cut out as much as you need to. I like how you have the space between the paragraphs here. But if you cut this out, that's going to enable you to insert more white space. And it's also going to allow you to insert your second image, which remember you need to have 2 images that you've taken. And I think there was only that one on the first page. So be sure to do that. Also be sure you're paying attention to consistency. I noticed between these 2 paragraphs, there is not a space. So make sure you have that so it stays consistent. When you cut it down, feel free to just add one small lane. Don't make it really big. Don't draw attention to it that just says read more at lds.org / whatever your link is, okay? So I think that's really going to free you up to cut some of this down. Remember the rule of contrast and try to add in some variety with your color scheme and with your font choices. You have some contrast already going on, but it's just the font probably overused. Okay, so good luck, Kathleen. I'm really looking forward to seeing what it looks like when you add in your second image and have a little bit more ability to have white space once your article is cut down a little bit. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. Okay, hi Abigail, how's it going? I hope you're able to get your timestamp issue resolved. I don't know what's going on. It's so weird that all your assignments are showing up late. So let's go ahead and look at your spread. Just glancing at it from far away, it looks kind of neat. I like the images that you have. Are these the same images? Is this the same as that one? And you just cropped it and this one's in color and this one's not? I'm guessing that's what's going on. I like the placement of this one. I like that it's really tall and long. I'm not a huge fan of this black and white because your whole composition doesn't have a lot of color to it. And so I would keep this in color so that you don't have an intro page that is darker. I like how you did this on the slant. That's cool. This is a nice contrasting font. Um, I do not love that your body copy is in this kind of digital looking new age font from probably like the 80s or something. You know, it looks like a throwback one, which can be cool as an accent, but it doesn't work for your body copy. So instead, I would switch this. I think this is a sans serif. It's a little bit hard to tell on Facebook because this image is so small, but I think this is a sans serif. So I would switch it to just a nice, clean, awesome looking sans serif. One of them you could grab from defont.com, one of these basics. Don't grab one that's all capitals, grab one maybe like this, or, and make sure it doesn't have too much flair because you're using it for your body copy. So your body copy needs to be something that stays simple, that has nice clean lines. You wouldn't be able to use something like this or something like this. It just needs to be super, super legible and not all caps, okay? So that's what I would recommend doing for this typeface. I like that you have your columns set up. Those are looking really good. You could make them a little bit smaller, maybe pull them in from the sides or give a little bit more white space on the top. So you have a little bit more room for your eye to breathe. And so it pulls your attention to those images you have on the page, which is really important. So I would maybe try to insert a little bit more white space somewhere. I like this image, but I would consider pulling it up off the page. It looks really contemporary and modern when you have an image that is a full bleed. And so this one looks pretty nice because it looks like it was an active choice to leave the same amount of spacing all around it. But on an intro page especially, it's really going to pop if you can make it a full bleed. And oh, you know what? I bet you did this as a choice to go along with the title. Like here's your black and white image and here's your colored image. And so that's kind of a cool thought actually. One thing is interesting is if this was actual magazine, your cover would be up on top of this page. Then you'd turn the page and you'd see this color had appeared in the same place where it was black and white before. So that's kind of neat. So I would, in that case, if that's what you're going for, which is a really cool thought, I would probably recommend making them both full bleed. And so that's going to make it look like a more modern design, but still keeping your idea of having it change from darkness to light. Okay. I think the main thing for me is this typeface, and then it looks like you have your subheadings on here. They look really good. And this is your pulled quote. I would put this pulled quote in one, probably this. Well, it might be too long to have it be in this, but you could use one of those sans serif fonts and then pick out a word or two to put in this font. And it's centered here, which I'm not a huge fan of, but you could leave it if you want a formal look. One thing I would recommend changing is your letters are right on the edge. So this is sometimes happens when you insert a shape or fill the background of a text box instead of inserting a shape. So insert a shape in the background and then you put the text box on top of it, and that allows you to have shape with more space on the side. The other thing is that I'm guessing you're on purpose kind of keeping it in alignment with your column, which is totally fine since you have this large image over here. I would just make sure you have plenty of space between when the words end and when the shape ends, okay? So those are a few suggestions. Looking forward to seeing what final choices you make, Abigail. Thanks. Okay, let's go ahead and see who's next. Yeah, and color scheme, I would like, you're totally right. It would be awesome to see what we can do to kind of up the color scheme a little bit, because you just have that pink, but you don't have a lot of other intensity. So I think that's a great idea. Okay. Misty, I think you opted in. Yes, you did. Okay, let's take a look at yours. Okay. The very first thing that pops out to me is that I'm pretty sure these are LDS.org images. And remember, part of the assignment is you have to include 2 images that you have taken. So, and Kathleen, yeah, she loves those photos. I know, they look really nice, but it is a problem in terms of the assignment because you do need to have images that you took yourself. You could leave one of them and then just switch out 2. So you have 3 images here and 2 of them are taken by you. Okay, I like your overall layout. I like how you have your columns. Those are looking really good. I might increase the space a little bit between where these 2 columns start and where your image is, so you have a little bit more room to breathe, and then you could eliminate some of this awkward white space right here where it looks like the article ended and you just didn't know what to do, and instead make your column width a little bit more narrow and have 2 columns that are smaller that exist in symmetrical spaces right here. So they start at the same place, they end, and they have white space around them. And that'll keep it looking really tidy, kind of something like this, okay? And that'll increase the amount of white space on the page, which will help the overall flow. It looks like you have your subtitles on here. Those look really nice. I like the spacing that you have in between your paragraph. This looks really good down here. I would play around a little bit more with alignment. See how your big question doesn't look like it's in alignment with the edge of this photo. And so I would move that down. The other thing is, I'm guessing this is a sans serif. And so you have your contrasting typeface in a serif, which is fine, but it is a little bit of a safe choice. And I might recommend trying to play around with something that's a little bit, adds a little bit more variety to the overall spread. Since your background color is this beige and the colors are a little bit more sedate with the shapes that you're making, it would be awesome if you could make a little bit more of a bold choice with your contrasting typeface. So maybe think about some of the defont.com. I would go look in maybe handwritten scripts or calligraphy scripts and see if there's something you like here that could really jump out and work well with your overall design. And that would help add an element of surprise to the design as opposed to keeping it looking really safe, which there's no problem with that. And a lot of like church manuals, they do things like this, but you want to kind of push yourself a little bit at the beginning so you know you can do things beyond what is safe. And so I'd recommend playing around with that a little bit. You're on the right track with them being contrasting typefaces though. Another thing I'm noticing here is this is centered as opposed, or maybe just placed arbitrarily as opposed to being an alignment with something. So make sure you're following that rule of design where everything is intentionally placed in alignment with the things around it. So I would move this over here so it starts in alignment with where your column starts. And the other thing I'm thinking is I'd like to see some variety in your title. So am I the type of leader the Lord needs? So maybe you have, if you decide to go with a script, or if you decide to keep your serif, maybe you have am I, and then small, the type of, and then a really pretty script, leader, small, the, and then Lord needs. Okay, so think about playing around with some variety. A few of your classmates have done a good job about figuring out how to make their titles really impactful, and so I would play around with that. If you have to switch out this image too, you could look in the images that you take for something that has a nice amount of white space on it, maybe sky or something that you would be able to put in your title, because I love the fact that this is a full page bleed. That looks really good. It's really going to catch your eye. Or say you want to keep this image and switch these two out, I would try to make sure that you can figure out a way for this to stand out. So maybe you have, am I the type of leader, kind of in the sandy part, and then the Lord needs to be down here. Something, play around with it a little bit, because like the T is getting lost and the Lord is getting lost. And so you don't want that to have, you obviously don't want that to happen on the spread. Okay, so those are a few things that I would work on, but overall this is a really great start, and I'm looking forward to seeing your choices as you move forward with finalizing it. Okay, thanks, Misty. All right. Okay, and Paola, let's take a look at your spread. You opted in, yes. All right. Okay, this is looking good. I love your first page here, how you have a nice big title in a space where it's legible. That's really good. One thing I will say is I noticed a little bit of a gap here. So I'm wondering if you just need to pull this image a little bit over more, or maybe your shape a little bit over more. It might not be that big of a deal on your PDF. I'm just picking it up on your JPEG pretty easily. Another thing is just make sure you're following the rule of alignment. So the edge of the big B should be lined up with Kathleen. So right now they're really close, and this is kind of creating a bit of a visual problem, as opposed to creating a visual, nice, aligned, crisp look that's going to make our brain not have to worry about it too much. Okay, so just make sure these are in alignment to each other. If you can make them in alignment over here too, that would be pretty cool. Maybe you can increase the tracking on by living water, so it has a little bit more space between the letters, and then they could be a really cool, crisp box of type down here, which would look great. Your color scheme is looking good over here. I like the blue and the green. I like how you've taken this image and made it into a shape. The flow is good because it points your eye toward the page as opposed to away the page. I will say there's not a ton of white space on this page. So like I've mentioned to other students, feel free to cut away a few paragraphs and just say, read more at lds.org. And then you can make your columns a little bit more narrow and add a little bit more white space down at the bottom and down at the top. You don't want a big white chunk of white space at the end, but it's going to allow you to add in more white space around your columns, okay? One thing I will say is I think your crease for the page is right here, which is going to be a problem with a pull quote, because the page is going to be folded in half, and you're going to lose the word and the end of nourishes and joy. So I would move this quote so it's somewhere that it's more legible, the whole thing, bearing in mind where your page is going to fold, okay? Another thing is following the rule of proximity. If you look at your subtitles, there's more space after your subtitle than before your subtitle. So what happened is you probably typed it in this bigger font size and then hit enter, and so you have like a 20-point enter right here, and so it's creating a ton of space. Before you had your, whatever this is, 12 points, you hit enter, so there's a 12-point space right here and a 20-point space right here. So what you need to do is delete this enter button and then this enter space, and then come in to your columns, and you're going to select this line here, okay, and on your paragraph palette, or actually on your character palette, you can increase the leading in between it. Okay, so see, I'm going to move it up, and it's going to increase it. Move it down, and it's going to pull it closer. So see how on my design I have more space between what was above it and less space between what's after it. That's telling me that this subtitle goes with this paragraph, which is what you want your message to be. It is available to all, goes with this section, as opposed to with the section before it. Okay, another thing, and it's especially like this is a really, really big gap, so that's one of the things that's making me aware of it. Another thing is it doesn't make too much sense to have your body copy interrupt a graphic element on the page when the other columns don't interrupt it. So I would move this graphic element up a little bit and move this Gospel of Jesus Christ down so it stays with these columns. And then you need to increase the amount of space between where your column starts and this element. These are a little bit too close together. They're kind of conflicting instead of working together. And one thing I think would be neat is if you could have this kind of cool line you have of dots go off the page. So you have it here, you have it here. Maybe you made a choice to do it there so it aligns, which is totally fine if that's what you want to do, but it might look neat since it's a graphic element to have it just seem like there's this line that goes all the way across the top of the page. So that's an option. Besides that, I think things are looking really good. Since a lot of your paragraphs kind of end on a similar line, you might try justifying your paragraphs. And so what you would do is you would select them all, and then you would come up here to paragraph. You are probably right now on this setting, and you could click this setting instead, which will create a nice crisp line at the edge of your words for you. All right, so I might play around with that a little bit, see if you like that too. But I'm really looking forward to some of the fine tuning you're going to do. I think you're off to a great start. I'm looking forward to seeing the end. Alrighty, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to Danique. Okay, I hope I'm saying your name right. Let me know if not. There we go. I could click on that for a second. Here are your 2 pages. Let's see, where's your title page? Title page. Down here maybe? Okay, I'm just reading this, what Abigail said. Yes, if you want to know how to connect all the pages into a JPEG, that is on this week's announcement video. I don't know where your 3rd page is, though. I'll critique what you have, but just do remember that you need to have 3 pages. So I want to make sure you do that so you get credit for that, because that would be a pretty big problem to only have the 2. You might still be working on that, though, which is totally fine. So, okay, so these are the images you have. I see you have 1 subtitle here. Make sure you have at least probably 3 subtitles. I think that's what the assignment says. So make sure you add in a few other subtitles. And then one thing that's jumping out to me is to make sure you add in some white space. So you're going to probably want to make your columns, a few of them, a little bit smaller so there's a little bit more white space up at the top or at the bottom. And I would increase the amount of space between where your column ends and where your image starts, so you have a little bit more of a buffer here. And I think you probably did a text wrap on this image. So how you're going to do that is when you have your image selected, you just come up here to the text wrap option, and you're going to increase the amount of spacing between where your image ends and where that paragraph starts, okay? And you can do that over here too, where you did the text wrap. And that's going to allow your words to have a little bit more room to breathe and to be more legible. Another thing I notice here is we just need to turn off the hyphens. So on your paragraph palette, when you have your columns selected, you can just hit Control A to select everything, and then you are going to click this button so it's not checked, and it will de-hyphenate those columns for you. And so that'll get rid of all these kind of awkward breakoffs where the words are. Another thing is I would probably decrease the font size of your font. With it being bolded too, I don't know if this is a bolded and italicized font or if it just looks like this, but I would try to choose a font that's not so visually aggressive, because how bold this is, it's almost competing with your images as opposed to working with them. And so I would look for a font that is a little bit more easy on the eye, isn't quite so aggressive when you glance at it for your body copy. What you want to go big and bold on are these subheadings. Okay, so I would make sure these subheadings are something that's nice and big and bold like you have them. And then your body copy is a little bit more sedate and legible and doesn't compete with that. Okay, so that's one of the things that we could do. Once you decrease the font size, it's going to free you up to have a little bit more room for adding in the space around your images. You could even make your images bigger. It always looks really good to pull an image off the page, and so you can increase the size of these images so you have some full bleeds, so they're not just in the middle. You could really make them fill up a nice big chunk of space, and that's going to add some visual pop to the design. It always looks really cool when you have an image that occupies space from the very top of the page to the very bottom of the page. Since this image is long and tall, you could consider having this image kind of fill a lot of the space and then have a small column right here with your type size decreased, so it still gets a lot of your words in, but it isn't quite so large and aggressive, and your eye is drawn to the focal point, which is the image. Also, I'd recommend changing this font out. On my weekly video, I go over how to download a font from dafont.com. And this one is another one of the default ones that comes on all the Microsoft Word and Adobe programs and is used a lot. So maybe consider coming in to dafont.com and downloading perhaps one of the handwritten fonts or one of the calligraphy fonts, and you could use that for your title as well as for those subheadings, and really going to help your overall design pop a lot more and look a lot more contemporary. So I would recommend doing that for these subheadings that you're going to be using. And then when you have your third page, you can use that for your title as well. So hopefully that helps out. If you're worried because you think you have too many words here and it's still overflowing the article, you can cut off after 600 words and just say read more at lds.org with the link. And that'll kind of help you free up and be able to make your images bigger, be able to have a nice big title on your first page, and be able to increase the amount of white space that you have on your design. You've done a really good job with your margins, especially here in the middle. I like how much room there is, but don't think that you have to keep your images in the margins. If anything, you want your images to break off the page so they draw your eye to it. All right, I look forward to seeing what decisions you make on your final draft. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go ahead and see who's next here. Lauren, did you opt in? Yes, okay. You're not liking, oh, you haven't taken your own photos yet. Okay. Here's this. Oh, that text wrap looks really cool. I like that. And this is definitely eye-catching. I noticed that even when I was just scrolling through Facebook. I like that it's, you know, so big and large. So very interesting. Okay, one of the things that jumps out to me immediately is this is that papyrus font. And I would change that out. There's a really funny video that us instructors have shared among ourselves, and it's about papyrus. So I might have to share it with you, Lauren, and then it will help you have motivation to change this one out. It does match with the like Egyptian theme, but a lot of people use it for things that are not remotely Egyptian, and so it's just become overused and kind of is one of those fonts that we say never use. And so I'd recommend changing that out. One thing is this background, I'm trying to figure out why your text, your shape is a circle, but your text wrap is a square. So I think what may have happened is when you went in to do your text wrap, you may have had, okay, it may be on a setting that's, oh, see how that just messed everything up when I clicked that? That's because it wasn't selected to wrap around the object shape. So I think that's what might be going on. It might be you might be clicked on wrap around bounding box instead of object shape. So make sure this is selected and then check out these settings too, both right and left sides, alpha channel. And hopefully that'll help you get a cool text box that will wrap around your circle instead of around the imaginary square that's around your actual visible circle. Okay, so play around with those. I think that'll help that look a little bit better. And notice how close your words are to the edge of your shape. That is because I think you may not have this sized up enough. So click this up once or twice. That's going to increase the amount of space between your image or your shape in this instance and where your type starts, okay? So increase that, and that's going to help you out. I like how you kind of did a text wrap around this too. That's cool. That might be switching out, huh? But if you did that, I would go back in again and I would increase it as well. So you don't have your words on this shape. So your words start in your background color instead. Okay. And then I would try to figure out a way to add a little bit more variety of color. It's kind of sedate in its overall impact right now, I think, because of this beige and then this really, really dark brownish red maybe you have back here. And so try to think if there's anything you can do to introduce more color. Also, I don't see your subtitles. So remember, you do need to have 3 subtitles in this. And so maybe one of them is at the beginning, one is here, and they're in a contrasting font. So whatever you decide to go with to replace papyrus. And maybe you make them in a bright gold or a vibrant blue or something that will help add some visual contrast on the page. And then you do have a lot of writing. Maybe this was a long article. Let's check out your other page. Yeah, see how much writing you have here. Oh, this is not, is this, do you have the real article on this one? Let's see if it's just filler. It is just filler. Okay, well, I just read this. Oh, you're funny. I like that. Okay. I'm like, wait a minute, this says something. I just answered your question. Okay, so your filler text isn't the text for your article yet. So obviously you're going to put that in. I would recommend then, if that's the case, your filler text, you should have way more white space because you don't even know how long your article is going to be in here yet. So I would see how close this is to the margin. All these words are going to be illegible pretty much. So I would make your columns a lot more smaller, move them away from this margin because this is where the page is going to fold. And so you're not going to be able to read anything for at least probably half an inch on either side. And then you don't want them to have to break the magazine to be able to read the last words. So I'd pull it away even a little bit more. I would pull them away from this is too close to the top of the page probably, and too close to the edge of the page as well. So pull in your margins a lot. Here's a good example. It doesn't have to be this extreme. This is more for visual impact, but look at how much white space I have, for example, around these columns, and that really helps it look contemporary. And then the images are what are big and go off the page. And then I have my nice subtitles here who draw attention to what's coming after them. Okay, so I'd play around with that. Especially this page, there's so much writing. Oh my goodness, imagine no one would read this huge chunk. But since this is place filler text, I imagine it's going to look kind of different when you have your actual text in there. But if it does look this long, go ahead and just remove the last couple paragraphs or however much you need to in order for you to get that space and that white space for it to breathe around it. Okay, so that's going to be really important, I think, to your design. And then you might even make this awesome, I don't know, Egyptian or Arabic writing even bigger. It could go even all the way across the page. Your subtitles could be bigger. You could add spaces in between the paragraphs. So that's going to free you up to make a lot of design choices that right now you can't make because there's so much writing. Okay, so hopefully that'll help you out, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the choices you make. So far, I think you're off to a good start. It's just about injecting a lot more white space and contrast. Okay, so thanks, Lauren. I look forward to seeing your final submission. Okay, let's see who's next. Let's see, Matt. Okay, you're next. Oh my goodness. Matt, you're my second to last. Okay, rough draft. Second page, third page. Okay, I'm gonna have to kind of try to visually place these together in my head. Obviously, this shape is a continuation of this shape. This pulled quote goes with that pulled quote. And then, so that's your 2-page spread. This is your title page. One of the things that's first sticking out to me is this orange on the blue is a little bit difficult to read. And mostly hard down here. This gets pretty hard. So what I would do is I would consider making this your title page and only maybe having the title. And pushing yourself a little bit, check out defont.com and look through these interesting fonts in the category of script for these 3 and see if there's something you can find that you really like, that you can have blessed by living waters, maybe blessed really big, and oh, someone else chose this talk, I think. And then by a little bit smaller, living waters, maybe in a different typeface. And so you have a real visual impact in this space right here. Now, if you want to keep the title a little bit smaller, you totally could. And then you could have the first, I don't know, 5 lines or so kind of in this space and then move on to the next page. You don't have to have so much writing on your title page, especially when you have a full bleed. The impact is you want to have the image grab your attention and you want to have the title grab your attention. The body copy is not that critical of an element that needs to grab your attention. And so focus on making this one of the main things your eye goes to. And her name honestly doesn't need to grab your attention either. You can make it smaller. You could size it about this size and really focus on the 4 words up there and how you can add contrast and visual impact to those, okay? Another thing is I'm feeling like this column is too wide. So I would pull in, if you keep any kind of column on this page, I would pull it in so it's not this width over here. And then I noticed that you have hyphens. And so I want to make sure you go in and when you are on your columns, just hit Control A and then come up to your paragraph palette and you're going to uncheck hyphens, make sure it's not on there, and that's going to help your design overall look a little bit better. You could also play around with, instead of having your paragraphs have this ragged line at the end, you can click this button, which will justify them and make them look nice and tidy. Okay, so that's something you could play around with. Let's go ahead and try to look at your next 2 pages and kind of do a little bit of a visual piece together in my mind. One thing I will say is when you're doing your second and your third page, you need to think about it like it's an actual magazine. So when you fold the actual magazine, your pull quote here, you're going to lose a bunch of the words in the middle to the fold. You're not going to be able to read probably half of this quote when you pair it with what's on the other page. So I would take this quote and I would put it somewhere else, okay? Oh, interesting. You did like a 3 columns up here and then a title, 2 columns down here. I actually really like that. I would add more space though, so it's not confusing, because some people might think like she had the living waters also, da da da. So it's kind of it takes a minute to figure out that your eye is supposed to go up. So what you can do is you add more space down here so it's totally obvious that your eye needs to go up here next. I would add maybe some interesting color here. I think your background might be a little bit too dark, so you could consider making it a shape that doesn't fill the whole page, or you could consider just lightening a little bit. The other thing is, I think this blue background and this even lighter blue pulled quote background kind of compete with one another. They don't visually go together very well. And so I would try to think of if you could just make these white perhaps, or awesome idea, you could make them black with your pulled quote in white typeface. That always is really visually impactful. And then maybe you, so your background, I can't tell what font this is. I hope it's just a normal sans serif, not like anything that looks like it has like a digital edge to it, kind of like a, you know, one of those old DOS programs. So make sure it isn't. It might just be the way Facebook is showing me the image because it's small, but make sure it's a nice, clear, crisp, legible typeface as opposed to anything that would be a little bit more difficult to read. Okay, something I would encourage you to do is increase the size of these boxes in the background so your letters don't end where the box does. This is called a tangent, when things end on the exact same place, and it creates kind of visual buzz that we don't love as designers. So you want to increase the space of this. Now, if you added a text box and you filled the background, you're going to need to take away that fill and just add a shape in the background that is bigger than your text box. And that's going to give you a lot more flexibility so you don't have these words right on the edge, okay? I'd love to see that super contrasting typeface in this, especially if you go like with a black box and white typeface. It would look really cool to have something compelling and interesting in terms of typeface here, and then you could do that here as well. I love that you have this big circle. I might even make it bigger, go home, right? And so that might be a good option for that. Let's see how it pairs up with your third page. And then you have 4 sections. Okay, you need to increase the amount of space between where your paragraph or where your image ends and where your paragraph starts. Okay, so come in to, once you have your circle selected, come in to your text wrap tool and increase the amount of space between where it ends. See how this is making this bigger, and where your circle begins, because you need to have room for those letters to breathe, okay? Let's see, another thing is, I think there's maybe too many pulled quotes, which I don't usually say, but there are 3 on this page and 2 images. And did you take this image? I'm curious. If so, that's a pretty creative image, I like it. But make sure you took 2 of your images, okay? She mentions the subtitles need to stay within the width that it's over. Yeah, that's, I was gonna actually say that, but then I realized you had your columns organized totally differently, where you don't read top to bottom, you read across the page. So I think you can keep them going all the way across. You might even make them a little bit bigger so they really go all the way across, as long as you increase the amount of space between the sections. If not, it might be a good idea. Well, I think that might be get too complicated. I might pull this image off the edge of the page. I would love to be able to see this all 3 pages at once, because these 2 pages, I'm trying to mentally put them together. If you have the time and want to, if you could save this as a 3-page spread, like how I show you to on this week's announcement video, and email it to me once you start making some of your changes, I'll be able to recommend a little bit better what you edit out. Because right now I think there's too many elements. You have 3 pulled quotes and 2 images. You have a text wrap. You have your columns, not traditionally going top to bottom on the page, but going across the page with their own individual subtitles that run across the width of the columns. So if anything, I think you need to figure out 1 or 2 things to edit out, and then insert some white space, insert some additional space between elements, and then we'll kind of be able to see what choices we should make based on that. So just bear those things in mind, but like I mentioned, feel free to email me if you're able to, and we can talk about it a little bit more. But I think you're definitely on the right track. If anything, you've just had a lot of thoughts about what you could do and done a lot of them. And so that's totally fine. That shows you're thinking about it and making some, a lot of choices, not keeping it boring. So if anything, we just need to figure out how to make it look more modern and contemporary by editing some of the choices and adding in some white space. Okay, so thanks, Matt. I'm looking forward to seeing your final draft. And let's see. I think I'm just down to one person. Christine, are you my last person? Come on, computer. Christine. There we go. Okay, Christine, you're my last person. Cool. I like your shapes. Neat how you have these images there. That looks really good. Love that. Okay, your columns look well done. Okay, one of the things I really like this spread down here. I think this is looking really good. I don't know if I like these huge big boxes. Or maybe I like them, I just am confused that they're not aligned with the column underneath them. So I would probably align them with the column underneath them. I like this pulled quote. I might make his name a little bit smaller, and that might allow you to move it down a little bit more. There is a lot of writing, so I'm debating a few things you could do visually. You could add a space in between your paragraphs. That's going to help break those up a little bit. Or you could eliminate a few of the last paragraphs so that well, I actually really like that it fills a lot of the page. And usually I don't say that, but I like that because it's structure and it's symmetrical in a way. And so it looks kind of nice to have that structure. So I wouldn't maybe recommend introducing a lot of white space to this portion, which is really funny because I don't usually say that. But I think it would be nice to maybe have a space in between your paragraphs because some of these paragraphs are really big. You could also break them into paragraphs a little bit more where you feel it would help the reader to continue to read since it's so much type on the page. And so I would consider doing that. And so if once you add in spaces, you're over the page, I'm totally fine with you eliminating a few of the last paragraphs. And so you have a little bit more room to break up these big paragraphs visually with a little bit of space in between them. Okay, let's take a look at your title page. I like the image and how you've inserted it into the shape. Oh, does this one? I don't think this one is consistent with the other. See how the other one, this image, you have go all the way off the page? And then this one ends in the page. I think I definitely would recommend this also being a full bleed on this image so it's consistent with your other spread. Okay, so pull this off the page so this image is off. And you say, I know it's word heavy, going to fix that. Awesome. Okay, that's good. And then I think the main place it's word heavy is on this page. I think this page, you really need to edit the amount of words you have on here. So your title can be really visually impactful, maybe go the full width of the page, and then maybe you have one paragraph right here. Oh, I like how you figured this out. Nice. You're the only one so far to figure that out. You should feel really good about that. Okay, so maybe you have one paragraph right here, or one paragraph right here, and then the rest of it is your cool image. Love how you did this. This looks awesome. And a visually impactful, contrasting within itself title. So did perhaps is, and I would love it if maybe you want to play around with an even more contrasting font on thefont.com, maybe one of those under the script category in these three, as opposed to your serif font here, which it's fine, but it's just a safe choice, you know, which is totally fine, but it doesn't add a lot of visual impact. And if you want your design to go from being nice and safe to really amazing, sometimes you need to do something that pushes the envelope a little bit, as like changing, you know, a nice classic serif to something that grabs your attention. So I think when you cut it down and you add maybe even only one paragraph here or 2 paragraphs, probably max, and then you can add a lot more space for your title to exist here, perhaps. And I think that's why I'm saying maybe the paragraph needs to be down here, is I can see your title existing in a nice big space right here. Okay. And then that's going to eliminate a lot, and you probably are going to have to cut off a bunch at the bottom. So I would probably move in that direction. And then this question mark is just not my favorite. I think it's too, it looks like something like from Microsoft Word a long time ago. Okay, so I think if you update your typeface, or if you decide not to, if you decide to keep this, I would probably maybe make this a background element, or consider getting rid of it. There's a lot going on this page. It's too complicated. So figure out your most important thing. Your most important thing is probably going to be your title. Second most important thing on the page is your image. Third most important thing is probably this paragraph and then the information here. So make sure your paragraph is 10 times more impactful than this, and not necessarily with size. I'm not saying it has to be 10 times bigger, but it has to be 10 times more visually impactful. And you do that through contrast within itself. So a really big did I maybe, and tell you, you can think about the way to kind of break it up a little bit, or the typeface you choose could make a really big impact too. You know, something like this could be really interesting. So I think that's the main place you need to work, is on that title page, and try to figure out how to make it look like something you want to, grabs your attention, and you want to stare at the image, and you're interested in the title based on those things. And then once you have this done, that'll kind of lead into the spread and how much you need to edit, how you can add some white space within it, and things like that. So hopefully that helps out a little bit. Christine, you're off to a good start though. And I think that's it. Did I get everyone on my list? Yes! All right, you guys are awesome. I'm so proud of you and how many of you opted in to do this. So great job, guys. Keep up the good work. Okay, bye.